Good morning to you. This is Mr. Moses Sekao from the East African Institute of Learning. Yesterday we are looking at the methodologies. We looked at how we collect data from the field, whereby we looked at what we call the primary data source. Then we also looked at the secondary data source. So some of the examples that may be falling under the primary data source, whereby we talked about the surveying, mapping, we talked about something like sampling, we went ahead and looked at also the observation, we talked about measurement as one of the examples that may be falling under what we call primary data source. When we proceeded, we looked at what we call the secondary data sources. We mentioned about some of them. We said here we can have what we call the literature review. After the literature review, somebody can talk about the films. You can also talk about photos and maps. And today we are going to be pushing up from there, whereby we are going to be looking at the tools of data collection. How is data, or how can data be collected from the field? And one of the way how we can collect data is through the use of the maps. When we get these maps, we are able to illustrate the information that you may have gathered from the field. It depends on a particular map that you may be asked to draw and what it may be containing. You may be told to go into the field and obtain data about the rivers that may be appearing in a specific area or within a particular country. Then you come up with that information and represent that information onto the map. The other thing here we can talk about is what we call statistical and quantitative techniques. Here we are much more need you to be talking about the techniques, how you can collect data and how you can treat that data. Here, when especially we use the computers and other means of technology to obtain data. It may be data in form of volumes or particular products. Maybe when you are told to find out the amount, if it is rainfall, when you are being asked to determine the amount of rainfall that can be received there. In other words, you go on to record the exact information depending how the weather was. You may be told to also determine the amount of you may be told to measure the temperature in terms of degrees. So that means that you have to be taking the degrees concerning how it had shined in that day. So that is also another technique or another tool we can use. We can also use what we call GIS, known as the Geographical Information System. See, here we have what we call the database. The database is organized, and once it is organized as the information concerning a particular area, they may be using they can be using aerial photographs or satellite images to capture the information, or census material that you can be using or that you can obtain from the field, and then you are told to represent the data. And this program, actually the GIS, is mainly used by pilots. Then also you can talk about people who are in who are in who are working with the airports. These people tend to use this information. Talk about the security men. They also use this database. And here you may be asked to zone out areas or residential areas or forests. It depends to what you may be asked. You may be told to look for this soil maps or to determine which areas receive rainfall or to find out the water pumps that may be existing in a particular area. But when the community is not aware of those water pumps, or when they are not aware about that information, so they usually use the satellite images and the aerial photograph to capture that information that may be appearing onto the ground. Then that information is kept in what we call the database, and a geographer or anyone that may be in need of that information, you can easily access that information. When you proceed, you have what called the matrix theories. This is like a program that is generated. It mainly employs the power and economic relationship between the physical environment and the human environment. Maybe here tasked to find out what activities or which economic activities may uh, be carried out in a particular area, and you are asked to find out the relationship between the physical and the human environment. So that is the matrix theory. Then when you go on, you have what we call the quantitative theory. I talked about that in terms of volumes. You may be told to determine or calculate the amount. It may be rainfall, it may be goods. So they table them in the form of a table. Then they ask you how you can obtain those information. So it requires someone who can go into the field to find out that data or to obtain that data and finally designs the table once the data is gotten. Below there you have some of the sample questions. I think when you look through with that number one, it says that distinguish between the primary and secondary. Then below you have another question which says that outline the main sources of geographical data. Then the other question they are talking about the tools, which we have said that once they ask the tools of data sources, the first thing you have to talk about are the maps. Then you go ahead and talk about statistical and other quantitative techniques. Then you talk about the use of GIS or Geographical Information System with the aid of the database. Then also you talk about the matrix theory. Then also the quantitative tests or analysis. That was unit 4, and we are going to be looking at we are going to be looking now at unit 4, which is the history of geography. We are going to be looking at the history of geography now. With the history of geography, this dates some years ago, around the 18,000 years ago, during the era of, or we can call it during the period of Neolithic, which is termed as the New Stone Age period. That's when the geography or the issue of geography as a discipline actually started to be when it was started to being captured. In the 17th century, many of geographers started making research and observed that geography was in existence. And around that year, geography as a subject started becoming an intellectual discipline, and that's when uh, the geographers started embracing geography as a discipline. In the 19th century, we are seeing that many people, especially the academians or the academic people who were involved in research, adopted geography as a discipline, depending to the higher institutions of learning like the universities and university geography departments. When we proceed, we are going to be seeing, uh, we are going to be looking at the origin of geography. When you had my introduction, I mentioned about the Neolithic period, around 8,000 years back. That's when people started to borrow the idea or to embrace geography as a subject, and they are saying that the first topographic map dates back 18,000 years ago during the New Age period. That is what is termed as Neolithic period. By around BC 1400, we are seeing that geographers from China, Egypt, and other nations started making research, and they found out that the showers of Mediterranean Sea had been explored during those years, actually around 1500 BC. That's when these people started making research about the Mediterranean Sea. Uh, when we proceed, we are going to be looking at how geography developed depending to particular groups of people and what these people did. Here we are going to be looking at the Greeks and the evolution of geography thoughts. Here we mainly going to be looking at the Greeks. How did the Greeks manage to expose geography? How did they do in terms of research? What did they find out? Uh, Here mainly is what we are going to be looking at. When you look at the Greeks, especially different figures like Herodotus, this man Herodotus, many of people, all researchers are referring to him as an historian. He was a historian at the same time he was also a geographer, Herodotus. When we proceed, for him he termed geography as a form of applied mathematics concerned with the measurements of the earth's dimension. For him, he termed as a mathematical, he termed as a mathematical or mathematic or applied mathematics concerned with the measurement of the earth. Another for him, he studied the earth concerning its measurement and how it looks and how it was looking by then. Therefore, he went ahead to describe the earth as a chronological geography, and he was one of the major researchers who adopted the term geography. However, he is also an historian in the making. That was Herodotus. Now we are going to be seeing how these people developed geographical ideas. I'm talking about the Greeks. The Greeks, we are talking about Herodotus and his colleagues. They came with the idea of saying that geography was referred as a mathematical or applied mathematics with the measurements of the earth. Upon that, these people went ahead and looked at what we call the locations of both the Anglican seas made by the Greeks. In other words, they considered this to be the study of the coastal geomorphology and ocean geography in terms of their research they had carried out. They went ahead and also made research about the winds and also the climates of the world, depending in particular regions that they underwent to study and find out. Therefore, they also went ahead and looked at the diversity of physical features of the Greeks. Here they went ahead to visit some of the mountain rivers and the other glaciated peaks or snow peaks, or what we can term as karsts. Then from there, they had to look at what we call the indented coastlines of the Greek in areas where they went to. When we proceed, we are seeing that they had to make also inquiries about the human customs and also the traditions to see were, how the people utilized the environment in relation depending to what they were doing. When we proceed, we are going to be seeing that these people had even prior knowledge from their ancestral people, such as the Chinese and the Egyptians, who gave them information about geography, whereby they had to borrow the concept of mathematical geography from the Chinese and Egyptians. When we proceed, we are going to be seeing how these people conducted these activities. What did they use in terms of finding out data? From there, we shall be shifting on to the contributions of the Greek Sea to the evolution of geography. I beg to stop.